The engine was still running. Nadia Colbert had been sitting in that parking lot for 22 minutes. She knew because she kept checking the clock on the dashboard. 10:47 p.m., then 10:51, then 10:58. Like the numbers might change into something that made more sense. The folder was open on her lap. 3 documents. That's all it took. 3 pieces of paper to dismantle 16 years. The first was a bank statement. An account she had never seen. Opened 14 months ago, 4 months before the day Wendell came home with his tie loose and his face gray and told her they had lost everything. The second was a lease agreement. A 2-bedroom apartment in Midtown Atlanta, signed by Wendell Colbert and Simone Archer. Date 11 months ago, the same week Nadia had sold her mother's gold earrings to pay their electric bill. The third was a letter. Handwritten. His handwriting. She knew every curve of it. She didn't finish reading it. Her wedding ring was on the dashboard. She had placed it there 10 minutes ago. Gently, like it was still something precious. She hadn't touched it since. Her hands weren't shaking anymore. That was the part that scared her most. She had gone completely still the way water goes still right before it freezes solid. He didn't lose everything. He hid everything. And somewhere across this city, Wendell Colbert was probably sleeping just fine. If you've ever loved someone with everything you had only to find out they were counting on that love to blind you, this story is for you. Stay with me. Because what Nadia discovered goes deeper than betrayal. It goes all the way down to the bone. Drop a comment and tell me where you're watching from and what time it is there. I read every single one. And if you're new here, hit that subscribe button so you never miss a story. Now let's go back to the beginning, because to understand how Nadia ended up in that parking lot, you need to know who she was before Wendell took that from her too. Nadia Colbert was not the kind of woman who asked for much. That was the first thing people noticed about her. Not her looks, though she was beautiful in the quiet, unassuming way that sneaks up on you. Warm brown skin, natural hair she wore in twists pinned back from her face, eyes that stayed on you when you talked. Like what you were saying actually mattered. No, the first thing people noticed was how little space she took up. How she'd give you her last and make it feel like a gift instead of a sacrifice. She had grown up in Southwest Atlanta, the second of 3 daughters raised by a single mother named Gloria, who worked the early shift at a hospital laundry for 31 years and never once complained about it in front of her children. Gloria used to say, "You want something in this life, you build it with your own 2 hands, and you thank God for the hands." Nadia had carried that her whole life, in her bones, in her choices. She became a school counselor at 31. Spent 11 years sitting across from teenagers who didn't have anyone else to sit across from. Kids who came to school, hungry kids who came to school, bruised kids who came to school and just needed one adult to look them in the eye and say, "I see you. You are not invisible here." Nadia was that adult. Every single day. She was good at her job the way some people are good at breathing. Naturally. Without effort. And then she met Wendell. She was 28 the first time she saw him. A mutual friend's cookout in the backyard of a house on Campbellton Road, August heat, pressing down on everything, the smell of charcoal and sweet tea in the air. Wendell Colbert was standing near the fence talking to 3 people at once, laughing at something. And Nadia noticed, before she noticed anything else about him, that the people around him were leaning in, not out of politeness, out of genuine pull. He had that thing. The thing that makes a room reorganize itself around a person. He caught her eye from across the yard and smiled. Not a performance smile. A caught-you-looking smile. Easy and warm. They talked for 4 hours that night. They talked so long the cookout ended around them and they didn't notice. He called her the next morning. 6:45 a.m. She had just made coffee. "I know it's early," he said. "I just didn't want to wait." 16 years later, every single morning, without exception, without being asked, Wendell Colbert got up before Nadia and made her coffee. 1 sugar, a splash of oat milk. Left it on the counter by the window where the morning light came in. Every morning, 16 years. That was the memory that lived in Nadia's chest like a splinter she couldn't reach. Not the grand gestures, not the anniversaries. That cup of coffee, that ordinary, faithful, daily cup of coffee. Because if a man does something like that for 16 years, what does it mean when you find out the whole time underneath the warmth, underneath the ritual, underneath the "I didn't want to wait," he was someone else entirely? It means the lie wasn't occasional. It means the lie was the life. They married 6 years after that cookout. A small ceremony at a hall on Cascade Road. Nadia's mother, Gloria, cried through the whole thing. Wendell's vows were handwritten 3 pages, and he read every word without his voice breaking once, which somehow made it more devastating than if he had cried. They built something real, or something that looked real from every angle. A brick house in a quiet pocket of southwest Atlanta. 2 incomes, Nadia's counseling salary, Wendell's financial advisory practice. Not wealthy, but solid. Dependable. The kind of life where you sleep without your stomach clenching. They had a dream they talked about on Sunday evenings, a youth counseling center. A real one, not a room in a school with a cracked ceiling. A place with resources and staff and enough funding to actually help. Nadia had a name picked out. She kept a notebook full of sketches and program ideas on the nightstand on her side of the bed. Wendell would look at that notebook sometimes and say, "We're going to build that, Nadia. Give me 5 more years to grow the practice and we're going to build that thing." She believed him. She had no reason not to. Wendell's practice had grown steadily over 12 years. 83 clients. Families, mostly people who trusted him with their retirement savings, their children's college funds, their futures. He had a reputation. People at church knew his name. Other financial advisors referred clients to him. He was exactly the kind of man his community pointed to and said, "That's what doing it right looks like." And he was good to Nadia. Patient. Present. He listened the way good listeners do, not waiting for his turn to talk, but actually in it with you. So when he walked through their front door on a Tuesday evening in March, tie-loose face the color of old concrete shoulders, carrying something invisible and enormous, Nadia felt it before he said a word. She stood up from the couch. "Wendell, what happened?" He sat down heavily at the kitchen table. He pressed both hands flat against the wood like he needed something solid. 3 clients pulled out this week, he said. Big ones. And the Hartfield investment, the one I moved 6 accounts into, it collapsed. Regulatory issue. The whole thing is under review. He looked up at her. "Nadia, we have $11,000. That's what's left." $11,000. She sat down across from him. The silence between them was the loudest thing in the house. "Okay," she said finally. Her voice was steady. "Okay. We've been through hard before. We figure it out." He looked at her with an expression she would later spend months trying to decode. At the time, she read it as gratitude, as relief, as love. She was wrong about all 3. For 4 months after that Tuesday, Nadia held everything together with both hands. She paid the mortgage. She covered the utilities. She skipped her own annual physical $300 she didn't spend and told herself she'd reschedule when things stabilized. She sold her mother Gloria's gold earrings, the ones Gloria had worn to church every Sunday for 20 years, the ones Nadia had planned to keep forever. She did all of it without complaint. Because that's what you do when you love someone. You show up. You hold the line. You don't count the cost. Wendell, meanwhile, grew quieter, more distant. He stopped reaching for her hand across the table, stopped asking about her day, spent evenings at what he called the library, researching recovery options, he said, rebuilding plans. She felt invisible, but she stayed. Because she believed in the coffee on the counter, in the handwritten vows, in the man who called her at 6:45 in the morning because he didn't want to wait. She stayed until the night she found a hotel receipt in the pocket of his jacket. The date was a Tuesday. The same Tuesday he told her he was at a financial recovery seminar in Savannah. Nadia held the receipt for a long time before she said anything. She had found it the way you find things you weren't looking for, reaching into his jacket pocket for a pen while he was in the shower. Her hand closing around a small folded slip of paper that her fingers recognized even before her eyes did as something wrong. The Meridian Hotel, Atlanta, Suite 314. Check-in Tuesday, check-out Wednesday morning. She set it on the bathroom counter. She went and sat on the edge of the bed. She listened to the shower running and tried to organize her thoughts into something that made sense. There's an explanation. That was the first thing her mind offered. There is always an explanation. She waited. When Wendell came out of the bathroom towel around his shoulders, he saw the receipt on the counter before he saw her face. She watched him see it. Watched his body register it, a half-second pause in how he was drying his hair, so brief she almost missed it. Almost. He turned to look at her. "I found that in your jacket," she said. "You told me you were in Savannah." What happened next was the thing Nadia would replay for months afterward. Not because she missed it, she didn't miss it, but because it was so precise, so perfectly calibrated. The way an actor hits a mark on a stage without the audience ever seeing him look for it. Wendell's face didn't go defensive. It went sad. Not caught sad. Not guilty sad. Deeply, quietly ashamed sad. He sat down on the bed beside her and looked at his hands. "I lied to you," he said. "Not about what you're thinking, but I lied." She waited. "I had a meeting, a potential investor, someone I found through a referral. I drove to Atlanta and I sat in that hotel lobby for 2 hours, and I begged a man I barely know to consider putting money into what's left of my practice." His jaw tightened. He said no. Didn't even think about it. Just no. He exhaled slowly. "I didn't tell you I was going because I didn't want you to see how desperate I've become. I didn't want you looking at me the way—" He stopped. "The way I'm probably imagining you looking at me right now." The silence stretched. Nadia studied his face, the downward pull of his mouth, the way his hands sat open in his lap, palms up, an unconscious gesture of surrender that she had always found disarming. "I'm sorry," he said. "I should have told you the truth." She believed him. She reached over and covered his hands with hers. She believed him, and she would carry the weight of that belief like a stone in her chest for a very long time afterward. Not because believing him was stupid, but because he was that good. Because 16 years of real history had built her a set of eyes that were calibrated to see the best in him. He had spent 16 years making sure of it. She apologized to him for doubting, for the look on her face. He held her and said, "We're going to be okay." She pressed her face against his shoulder and closed her eyes. Neither of them spoke. The silence felt like comfort. It wasn't. 2 weeks later, Wendell brought Simone Archer to their home for the first time. "She's been helping me think through a rebuilding strategy," he said, his voice easy and matter-of-fact, like this was simply the next practical step. She's sharp, Nadia, really sharp. And she believes the practice is salvageable. Simone arrived at 6:30 on a Thursday evening, carrying a bottle of red wine and a genuine smile. She was 39 tall and lean with close-cropped natural hair and the kind of effortless, put-together look that suggested she had never rushed anywhere in her life. She shook Nadia's hand with both of hers. "I have heard so much about you," Simone said warmly. "This house is beautiful. You have such a gift for making a space feel like a home." She wasn't overdoing it. That was the disarming part. She wasn't performing warmth, or if she was, the performance was so refined, it had become indistinguishable from the real thing. They ate dinner together. Simone was funny, self-deprecating, asked Nadia questions about her counseling work, and actually listened to the answers. She talked about the financial recovery strategy in practical terms. Nothing alarming, nothing that raised flags. Just a woman who knew her field helping a colleague in crisis. Nadia's gut said something is off. She told her gut to be quiet. She was paranoid. She was stressed. She was reading threat into kindness because she was exhausted and frightened and looking for something to explain why her life felt like it was slipping sideways. That's what she told herself. Later that night, after Simone left and Wendell was cleaning up the kitchen, Simone sent Nadia a text. "So lovely to finally meet you. You are such a strong woman. Wendell talks about you constantly. Honestly, he doesn't deserve you." Nadia stared at the message for a long moment. She typed back, "Thank you. It was great meeting you too." She put the phone face down on the nightstand. She didn't sleep well that night. She told herself it was just anxiety. 3 days later, Nadia was in the kitchen when she heard Wendell's voice from the back hallway. He was on the phone. His voice was low, not whispering, but controlled. The careful volume of a man who knew exactly how far sound traveled in a house. She stood very still. "She's still holding on. Give it 2 more months." A pause. I know. Just 2 more months." Then the sound of his footsteps moving away from the hallway toward the back bedroom. Nadia set down the glass she was holding. She pressed both palms flat against the kitchen counter. Her heart was knocking against her ribs. She's still holding on. That night at dinner, she brought it up. Carefully. Casually. The way you approach something you're afraid to name directly. "I heard part of your call earlier. You said something about holding on 2 more months." Wendell looked up from his plate. His expression shifted through 3 things in under a second and landed on patient, slightly tired explanation. "Client account," he said. "One of the holdouts. I've been managing their expectations since the Hartfield situation. 2 more months before we can fully assess the damage." He held her gaze steadily. That's all it was. She nodded. She went back to eating, but something had changed in the air between them, thin as a wire, nearly invisible, and Nadia felt it even if she couldn't name it. That night, she waited until Wendell's breathing deepened into sleep. Then she got up quietly, went to the kitchen, and found his gym bag by the back door where he'd dropped it after his evening workout. She unzipped the front pocket. Inside, between a folded receipt and a protein bar wrapper, was a second phone. Small. Prepaid. Dark screen. Her hands went still over it. She didn't open it, but she took out her own phone, turned on the camera with the flash off, and photographed it where it lay. Then she zipped the bag back up, exactly as she'd found it. She went back to bed. She lay in the dark beside the man she had loved for 16 years and stared at the ceiling. And she started watching. The watching changed her. Not loudly, not all at once. It happened the way erosion happens slowly, quietly, one layer at a time until one day you look down and the ground you were standing on is simply gone. Nadia started keeping notes. Small things, dates and times in a plain notebook she kept inside her winter coat in the back of the closet, the last place Wendell would ever look because Wendell never felt cold. Tuesday home at 10:40 p.m. said he was at the library until closing. Thursday gym bag smelled like cologne, not sweat. Saturday took a call in the driveway, sat in the car for 40 minutes before coming inside. She wrote it all down. She didn't know yet what she was building. She just knew she needed to build something. Meanwhile, Wendell was changing too. Not dramatically. Not in ways a stranger would notice. But Nadia had spent 16 years learning this man, the way you learn a house you live in, every creak, every draft, every place the light fell differently in the afternoon. She knew him. And what she knew now was that someone had quietly rearranged all the furniture. He became critical in the small, grinding way that leaves no marks. "You seem tired lately. Are you handling everything okay?" "I just worry you take things too personally, Nadia. Always have. I know this situation has been hard on you emotionally. Maybe you should talk to someone." Each sentence arrived wrapped in concern. Each one landed like a small, precise cut. Because the most insidious thing about that kind of language is that it sounds like care. It sounds like a man who is worried about his wife. And if you push back, if you say that hurt me, you become the one who is too sensitive, too emotional, too fragile to handle reality. Nadia recognized it. She had sat across from enough people in her counseling office to recognize the shape of it. But recognizing something and escaping it are two entirely different things, especially when it's coming from inside your own home. Especially when the person doing it has 16 years of your trust as a foundation to build on. She started second-guessing herself. That was the victory he was going for, and he was winning it. Simone appeared more frequently now. Always with a reason, a document to review, a strategy update, a question that couldn't wait. She and Wendell would sit at the dining room table with laptops open and papers spread out, speaking a language of numbers and projections that Nadia didn't share. And Simone kept texting Nadia. Friendly, warm, perfectly spaced messages that arrived just often enough to feel like friendship and just infrequently enough not to feel like pressure. "How are you holding up, sis? You seem exhausted in the best way, like someone carrying too much for too many people. Just wanted to check in. You don't have to carry all of this, you know." Nadia's sister, Rochelle, who had driven up from Macon for a weekend visit, watched Simone leave after one of her drop-bys. Rochelle stood at the front window with her arms folded and her jaw set in the way it always set when she was deciding whether to say something. She said something. "Nadia, don't. I haven't even said anything yet. You have that face." Rochelle turned from the window. "That man is too calm. I'm serious. I have watched men go through financial ruin my whole life, my daddy, my uncle, half the men in our family, and not one of them looked like Wendell looks right now. Broke men don't carry themselves like that. Broke men are scared. Broken. They wake up at 3 in the morning. They lose weight. They stop laughing." She paused. "Wendell is still laughing, Nadia." Nadia was quiet for a moment. "He's always been steady," she said finally. "That's who he is." Steady and unbothered are two different things. "Rochelle, I'm just saying what I see. And I'm saying I know my husband." Rochelle looked at her sister for a long time. Then she picked up her coffee cup and let it go. But she didn't stop watching either. The push came on a Wednesday evening in late October. Wendell came home earlier than usual. He was quiet through dinner, not the loaded quiet of anger, but the deliberate quiet of a man arranging words before he used them. Nadia watched him from across the table and felt something cold move through her chest. After dinner, he didn't help clear the plates the way he usually did. He just sat there, hands folded, and waited until she sat back down. "I've been thinking," he said, "about us, about what this situation has done to us." She waited. "I don't think I'm able to be the man you need right now." His voice was measured, sorrowful, careful as a surgeon's hand. "I feel like every day I'm watching you carry weight that should be mine, and it's destroying me, Nadia, seeing you like that, knowing I caused it." "So what are you saying?" "I'm saying maybe we need some space." He looked up at her. His eyes were wet, not crying, just the precise, controlled shimmer of a man who had practiced this. "Not forever. Just space to breathe, so I can get myself right without watching it cost you everything." She felt the floor shift beneath her. "You want me to leave?" "I want us to survive," he said. "And I don't know if we can do that while we're both drowning in the same water." The tears came then. Nadia's, not his. She hated herself for them, even as they fell, because she could feel the manipulative architecture of what was happening, and she was crying anyway, because she was human and she was tired and she loved him, or she loved who she thought he was, and sometimes you can know the truth in your mind while your heart is still 3 steps behind. "Wendell." "I love you," he said quietly. "That's why I'm asking." Nobody spoke after that. The silence said everything, or so she believed. What she didn't know was that the silence was only speaking his lines. She went upstairs. She pulled a bag from the top shelf of the closet. She packed it slowly, folding each item with the careful deliberateness of someone trying to hold themselves together through the physical act of doing something ordinary. When she came downstairs with the bag, Wendell was standing in the doorway to the kitchen. His expression was pained, tender. Exactly right. "I'll call you," he said. She nodded. She couldn't speak. She walked to the front door. She opened it. The October air came in cold and immediate. She stepped outside and pulled the door shut behind her. She didn't look back. She would regret that, not because looking back would have changed anything, but because later she would wish she had seen his face in that moment. The real one. The one he was wearing before he heard her car pull out of the driveway. Because when Nadia reached the end of the street and her headlights swept around the corner, she saw parked 1 block down beneath a broken streetlight a silver car she recognized. Simone's car. Engine running. Waiting. 11 months is a long time to grieve something that isn't dead. That was how Nadia thought about it during the quiet hours, the ones between 2 and 4 in the morning when Rochelle's guest room was dark and the rest of the world was asleep and there was nothing between her and her own thoughts. She wasn't grieving a marriage that had ended. She was grieving one that had never fully existed, and there was no name for that kind of loss. No casserole dishes from neighbors. No cards. No one sitting with you in the dark saying, I know it hurts." You just carried it. She had moved into Rochelle's house in Macon the week after she left. Rochelle had made up the guest room without asking questions, put fresh towels on the rack, and left a plate of food outside the door that first night without knocking. That was the kind of love Nadia had always taken for granted, the kind that doesn't announce itself, that just shows up and does the thing that needs doing. She found work. Freelance consulting for a nonprofit education organization, reviewing counseling programs, writing assessments, sitting on Zoom calls with school administrators 3 states away. It was good work. Purposeful. It got her out of her head for 6, sometimes 7 hours a day, which was the most she could ask for. The divorce papers arrived 9 weeks after she left. Wendell's attorney was a man named Prescott Smooth, unhurried, the kind of voice that made everything sound reasonable even when it wasn't. The filing cited irreconcilable differences. The financial disclosure attached to the paperwork was thin to the point of insult. The practice was listed as having negligible value still under regulatory review, no significant assets. Personal savings depleted. Real property. The Atlanta house currently valued at $280,000, with $190,000 remaining on the mortgage. That was it. The man who had managed $4 million in client assets for 12 years, who had driven a $58,000 car and taken them to the Dominican Republic for their 15th anniversary, was claiming he had almost nothing left. Nadia read the filing 3 times. Something in her chest that had been soft and grieving slowly hardened into something else. She almost signed. She had the pen in her hand. She was sitting at Rochelle's kitchen table on a Tuesday morning in late January, the papers spread out before her, and she was going to sign because she was tired, and because fighting felt like it would cost her more than it was worth, and because some part of her just wanted it to be over. Her phone buzzed. An email. Sender name she didn't recognize, E. Pickett. Subject line, I worked in your husband's building for 22 years. I think you need to see something. She stared at the screen. She put the pen down. She called the number in the email that afternoon. An older man's voice answered unhurried, slightly gravelly, with the measured cadence of someone who had spent a lifetime being careful with words. Miss Colbert, he said. Thank you for calling back. My name is Earl Pickett. I used to work the maintenance crew at the Peachtree Commerce Building on 17th Street. That's where your husband kept his office suite, 802. I remember the building, she said. I retired 3 months ago. 22 years in that building. A pause. I found your email through the nonprofit you used to work for, the one that had the little office on the 4th floor before it closed. You used to come in some mornings and you always said good morning to the crew. Most folks didn't bother. Something tightened in Nadia's throat. I remember. I have something you need to see, Earl said simply. I don't want anything for it. I'm not looking for money or attention or any of that. I watched that man operate for a long time, Miss Colbert. A very long time. And I watched him treat people like they were furniture, like they were part of the building, like we couldn't hear or see or remember. His voice stayed even. We could hear, we could see, and I remember. They met 2 days later at a diner off I-75, a corner booth mid-morning, the kind of place where the coffee is strong and nobody pays attention to anybody else's business. Earl Pickett was 71 years old with close-cropped white hair and hands that were wide and worn from decades of physical work. He wore a clean button-down shirt and carried a plain manila envelope that he set on the table between them without ceremony. Before I show you this, he said, I want you to understand how I found it. I'm not a snoop. I'm not someone who goes through people's things. I believe you, Nadia said. The shredder on the 8th floor jams about once a week, always has. Part of my job was clearing it. He folded his hands on the table. 8 months ago, I cleared a jam and found this caught in the feed rollers. Torn up, but not all the way through. I don't know why I kept it. I just had a feeling. He opened the envelope and slid it across to her. Inside was a single sheet of paper torn into several pieces, reassembled with clear tape, the edges still ragged. The handwriting was immediate and unmistakable. She knew every curve of it. Her hands started shaking before she read the first line. The letter was dated 14 months ago. 3 months before the day Wendell came home with his tie loose and his face gray and told her they had $11,000 left. It was addressed to Simone. Simone, the timeline is set. Hartfield gets flagged in Q1. I pull the trigger on the personal accounts in March. By the time the review starts, everything worth keeping is already moved. Archer Colbert is registered and running. Nadia doesn't know about the Delaware filings, and she won't look. She trusts me completely. That's always been her best quality and our best advantage. She's too honest to stay once she thinks I'm broken. Use that. Once she walks, we're clear. No asset disclosure, no complications. Clean. Nadia read it once. She read it again. She read it a third time, each word landing separately like stones dropped into still water. Her coffee cup was in her right hand, and at some point her grip loosened and it tilted, and coffee ran across the table and she didn't notice. Didn't feel it. Didn't move. She's too honest to stay once she thinks I'm broken. Use that. 16 years. 16 years of coffee on the counter and handwritten vows, and I didn't want to wait, and underneath all of it, this calculation, this cold architectural use that. She had not been loved, she had been managed. Earl reached across the table quietly and righted the coffee cup. He didn't say anything. He just let her sit in it, because he was the kind of man who understood that some truths need a moment before they can be carried. When she finally looked up, her eyes were dry. Her jaw was set. "You said that wasn't the worst part," she said. Her voice was very quiet and very steady. "On the phone, you said you thought there was more." Earl nodded slowly. He reached into his shirt pocket and pulled out a small folded piece of paper, a printout creased from being folded and unfolded many times. He placed it on the table in front of her. It was a flight record. Wendell Colbert, Atlanta to Grand Cayman, 4 months ago. First class. "A man with $11,000, Earl said quietly, "doesn't fly first class to the Cayman Islands, Miss Colbert." The truth sat between them on that table like something alive. And Nadia Colbert, who had sold her mother's gold earrings to keep the lights on while her husband was booking first-class seats with money he had hidden from her, felt something shift permanently and irrevocably in the center of her chest. Not grief this time. Something colder. Something sharper. Something that felt for the first time in 11 months like power. Nadia did not sign the divorce papers. She put them in a drawer in Rochelle's guest room face down, and she left them there. She didn't tell Wendell's attorney. She didn't respond to the follow-up email that arrived 4 days later, asking if she had any questions about the filing. She just went quiet the way you go quiet when you are done reacting and have started thinking. She found Carla Webb through a referral from an attorney contact she had made years ago through her nonprofit work. Carla was a forensic accountant based in Atlanta, 46 precise, with the kind of unhurried competence that made you feel like things were already under control, even when they weren't. She wore reading glasses on a chain around her neck and spoke in complete sentences that never wandered. They met on a Thursday morning. Nadia laid everything on the table: the letter Earl had given her, the flight record, the divorce, filing, the financial disclosure that listed almost nothing. She spoke clearly and without crying, which surprised her. She had expected to cry. Instead, she felt like someone reading coordinates off a map. Carla listened without interrupting. When Nadia finished, Carla picked up the taped-together letter and read it twice. Then she set it down and looked at Nadia over her reading glasses. "Give me 2 weeks," she said. Carla Webb was efficient in the way that very intelligent, very experienced people are efficient, not fast for the sake of speed, but precise in a way that eliminated wasted motion entirely. She pulled records the way a surgeon pulls thread, clean, deliberate, following exactly the right line. What she found in 14 days made Nadia sit down and not stand up again for a long time. 3 shell companies registered in Delaware, a 4th in Florida, All of them formed within an 18-month window, beginning, Carla noted quietly, approximately 6 months before the so-called collapse. Not after. Before. The companies had unremarkable names, consulting firms, holding entities, the kind of bland corporate language designed to be invisible. But the money moving through them was not invisible to someone who knew how to follow it. $2.3 million shifted in pieces timed carefully to stay beneath reporting thresholds, funneled through a parent structure called Archer Colbert Group. Archer Colbert. Simone's last name. Wendell's last name. One company, both names. Registered. Carla paused when she told Nadia this, letting it land fully the day after Nadia was served divorce papers. Simone Archer was not a business partner helping a colleague in crisis. Simone Archer was a co-founder, a co-owner. She had been building a future with Wendell using money that belonged at least in part to the marriage Nadia was still legally part of. The wine, the warm smile. You are such a strong woman. He doesn't deserve you. Nadia sat with that for a long moment. The audacity of it. The sheer, breathtaking audacity of sitting at another woman's dinner table, complimenting her home, drinking her wine, while your name was already on the paperwork designed to take everything from her. There's one more thing, Carla said, her voice careful. The Archer Colbert registration shows Simone as 50% owner. But the signature on one of the founding documents, the one that authorized the initial capital transfer, doesn't match Wendell's verified signature on other filings. She set the comparison page on the table. Someone signed his name, and it wasn't him. Nadia looked at the two signatures side by side. Simone forged his signature, she said. That's what the analysis suggests, Carla said. Which means your husband has a co-conspirator who is also stealing from him. The room was very quiet. Then slowly Nadia laughed. It was not a happy sound. It was the sound of someone who had finally seen the whole picture, every piece of it, and found it so complete in its ugliness that the only response left was something between disbelief and a dark, hollow recognition. He built a trap for me, she thought, and Simone built one for him. She called Wendell that afternoon. She had rehearsed nothing. She had decided, sitting in Carla's office with the shell company documents spread across the desk, that rehearsing would make her stiff. She wanted to hear his voice land naturally against the truth she was now holding. He answered on the second ring. Nadia. Warm. Easy. The voice of a man with nothing to hide. Hey, I was going to call you this week about the papers. How's the recovery going? She asked. Her voice was pleasant, conversational. Slowly, he said. But we're making progress. Simone found a new structure that... And how is Archer Colbert Group? The silence that followed lasted exactly 3 seconds. She counted them. 1, 2, 3. Where did you hear that name? His voice had changed, not angry, controlled. The warmth was gone, replaced by something stripped down and watchful. Nadia said nothing. Nadia. She hung up. She was in Rochelle's kitchen 40 minutes later when headlights swept across the front window. A car she recognized, his gray Lexus, the one he'd told her he'd sold 6 months ago, pulled up to the curb. Rochelle came to the kitchen doorway. Is that... Yes, Nadia said. You want me to stay. The knock at the door was firm, not frantic. The knock of a man who had decided on his approach during the drive over. Rochelle opened it. Wendell stood on the porch in a dark jacket, hands in his pockets. His face composed into something that was no longer bothering with sadness. He looked past Rochelle at Nadia. Can we talk? He said. Privately? Whatever you have to say. Nadia said, you can say it here. Something moved across his face. A recalculation. He stepped into the doorway, not inside, just filling the frame. And when he spoke, his voice was low and deliberate, the voice he used when he wanted to sound reasonable while delivering a threat. "I don't know what someone told you or what you think you found," he said. "But you need to be careful, Nadia. This can go easy or it can go hard. I have attorneys who handle situations like this every day, and He paused, letting the next words settle like weight. "You don't have the resources to fight me." The porch light was on. It caught the angles of his face clearly. This was Wendell without the performance, and what was underneath was smaller than she'd expected. Meaner, more frightened. Rochelle stepped forward. Her voice was flat and final. "She doesn't need resources. She's got truth." A beat. "Get off my porch." Wendell looked at Rochelle, then back at Nadia. His jaw tightened. He turned and walked back to his car without another word. The door of the Lexus, the car he'd claimed to have sold, closed with a quiet, expensive click. Rochelle shut the front door. Neither sister spoke for a moment. Then Nadia's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. A security alert from her email provider. Unauthorized login attempt detected. Location Atlanta, Georgia. Time 10:14 p.m. She looked at the notification, then at the door, then back at the notification. "He just tried to get into my email," she said quietly. Rochelle looked at her sister, really looked at her, and what she saw was not the exhausted, hollowed-out woman who had arrived at her door 11 months ago with a single bag and red eyes. What she saw was someone who had stopped being afraid. That night, Nadia barely slept, but this time it wasn't grief keeping her awake. It was strategy. And somewhere across the city, just before midnight, Nadia's phone lit up with a text from a number she didn't recognize, but the words stopped her cold. "Miss Colbert, this is Simone. I think we need to talk. There are things about Wendell you still don't know. Things that change everything. Please call me." Nadia stared at the screen for a long time. The trap was eating itself. Nadia did not call Simone back that night. She set the phone face down on the nightstand and lay in the dark and thought about it with the careful, unhurried clarity that had become her new way of moving through the world. She thought about what it meant that Simone had reached out. She thought about the forged signature on the Archer Colbert founding documents. She thought about a woman who had smiled across her dinner table and said, "He doesn't deserve you," and meant it, just not in the way it sounded. Simone wasn't reaching out because she felt guilty. Simone was reaching out because she was cornered. There is a difference. Nadia had spent 11 years as a school counselor learning to tell those two things apart: the child who comes to your office because they are sorry, and the child who comes to your office because they have calculated that coming to you is their best remaining option. The body language is almost identical. The eyes give it away. She would call Simone, but not yet. Not until she had something Simone didn't know she had. She picked the phone back up and texted Carla Webb, "How fast can we file for a court-ordered asset freeze?" Carla's response came back in 4 minutes, which told Nadia that Carla had also not been sleeping. "Petition is already drafted. I was waiting for your word. Give me the go-ahead, and I file at 8 a.m. Nadia typed 2 letters. Go. She called Simone the next morning at 7:45, 15 minutes before Carla walked into the courthouse. Simone answered on the first ring. She sounded like someone who had been awake for a very long time and was trying not to let it show. "Nadia, thank you for calling." "You said there are things I don't know," Nadia said. No greeting, no warmth, just the sentence. "I'm listening." A pause. Simone seemed to be deciding how much to give and in what order. The negotiation of someone who understood that information was currency and was trying to spend it carefully. "Wendell isn't who you think he is," Simone said. "I know you already know that, but what you don't know is that he's done this before." Her voice dropped slightly. "There was another woman. Before you. A business partner named Tanya Prescott. He ran the same structure. Fake financial crisis, manufactured distance, transferred her out of a joint investment account. $180,000. She never saw it coming." Nadia said nothing. She let the silence work. "I can give you documentation," Simone continued. "Emails, account records, Tanya's contact information, all of it." "And what do you want in exchange?" Nadia asked. Another pause, longer this time. "I want the forgery charge dropped," Simone said quietly. "I made a mistake. I got greedy and I went further than the plan, and I know that. But Wendell built the whole thing. He recruited me. He laid out every step. I was a tool he used, and then I tried to use him back, and I went too far. I know that." A breath. "But I am not the architect of this, Nadia. He is." Nadia listened to all of it. She heard the self-serving calculation threaded through every sentence. She heard the genuine fear underneath it. She heard somewhere beneath both of those things something that might have been a fragment of actual truth. "I'll be in touch," she said. She hung up. Then she sat quietly for a moment and thought about the particular loneliness of being used by someone you trusted, the specific weight of discovering that your loyalty was someone else's leverage. She thought about Simone making that calculation and deciding Wendell was worth it, and then making another calculation and deciding he wasn't. She felt no sympathy, but she felt something adjacent to recognition. We were both managed, she thought, just differently. Carla filed the petition at 8:03 a.m. By 2:15 p.m., a judge in Atlanta's Fulton County Superior Court had reviewed the forensic audit summary, the shell company registrations, the flight records, and the reconstructed letter, and granted a temporary restraining order freezing all accounts associated with Archer Colbert Group and its subsidiary entities pending a full hearing. $2.3 million. Frozen. Wendell's attorney called Carla's office at 2:47 p.m. The tone Carla reported to Nadia afterward with quiet satisfaction had changed considerably. That evening, Nadia drove back to Atlanta, not to the house, not yet. She met Earl Pickett at the same diner, Office 75, same corner booth, same strong coffee. Earl looked the same as he always did, unhurried, clean shirt, hands folded on the table. But there was something different in his eyes tonight. A readiness. "I have one more thing," he said. "I've been holding it because I wanted to make sure you were ready to use it." He reached into his jacket pocket and placed a small USB drive on the table between them. "The Peachtree Commerce Building updated their intercom and speaker system 2 years ago," Earl said. "New equipment, better range. It picked up audio from the conference rooms on the 8th floor, not intentionally, just a calibration issue that facilities never got around to fixing." He looked at her steadily. "I was the one who logged the calibration reports, which means I had the access code to the archived audio files when I retired." Nadia looked at the USB drive. "How many recordings?" she asked. 11 months of conference room conversations," Earl said. "I didn't listen to all of it. I listened to enough." He slid the drive across the table. "There are 2 conversations between Wendell and Simone that you need to hear," he said quietly. "One from 13 months ago, 3 weeks before the collapse. One from 8 months ago, 2 weeks after you left." Nadia picked up the drive. "The second one," Earl said. and for the first time something moved across his face that wasn't quite his usual measured calm. Something older, something that had been sitting with him for a while. The second one is the one that's going to hurt. I want you to know that before you listen. It's going to hurt in a specific way. Tell me, she said. Earl was quiet for a moment. He laughs, Earl said simply. In the second recording, they're talking about you leaving, about how it went exactly according to plan. And he laughs. A pause. It's not a small laugh. The diner was warm around them. Someone at the counter was ordering pie. A song was playing low on the radio, something old and slow and sweet that had no business being in this moment. Nadia closed her hand around the USB drive. She didn't cry. She had moved past the place where this particular kind of information could make her cry. What she felt instead was a profound, settling clarity, the kind that only comes when the last piece of something falls into place, and the full shape of the thing is finally completely visible. Thank you, Mr. Earl, she said. You're going to be all right, he said. It wasn't a question. It wasn't encouragement. It was an assessment delivered with the quiet confidence of a man who had watched enough of the world to know the difference between someone who was broken and someone who was finishing the process of becoming unbreakable. She drove back to Rochelle's that night with the USB drive in her jacket pocket and Carla Webb on speakerphone for most of the 40-minute ride. By the time she pulled into Rochelle's driveway, they had a plan. The hearing was scheduled for Thursday. Thursday was 3 days away. And somewhere in Atlanta, in the conference room of a law office she had never been inside, Wendell Colbert's attorney was sitting across from a man who was running out of moves, and both of them were beginning to understand it. That night, Carla called with news that made Nadia grip the phone with both hands. He's moving to liquidate one of the shell companies, Carla said, her voice urgent and stripped of its usual composure. The Florida entity, there's $800,000 in it. If he finds a way around the freeze before Thursday, that money is gone. Permanently. A beat. I need you in my office at 7 a.m. tomorrow, Nadia. We have to move the hearing up. Tonight, if possible. Nadia was already standing. I'll be there, she said. The emergency hearing was granted at 6:47 a.m. Carla had been on the phone with the court clerk's office since 5:30, citing the liquidation attempt as grounds for immediate judicial intervention. The freeze order was already in place, but Wendell's attorneys had filed a motion to dissolve it overnight, arguing the accounts were legitimate business assets unrelated to the marital estate. The motion was aggressive and technically sophisticated, and had clearly been prepared well in advance, which told Carla everything she needed to know about how long Wendell had been planning for exactly this moment. The judge assigned to the emergency session was the Honorable Patricia Okafor, 61 years old, 22 years on the bench, with a reputation for reading financial fraud cases the way other people read novels. Quickly, completely, and with very little patience for people who assumed she wouldn't understand the details. Nadia arrived at the courthouse at 7:45 in a dark blazer and flat shoes, Carla beside her, Rochelle, 2 steps behind. Rochelle had driven up from Macon at 4 in the morning without being asked. She showed up at the door with a thermos of coffee and her good earrings on and said simply, "I'm coming." Nobody argued. The courtroom was smaller than Nadia had imagined. Wood paneling, fluorescent light, the smell of old paper and central air. Wendell was already seated at the opposing table when she walked in. Dark suit, his attorney beside him, a second man she didn't recognize on the other side. He looked up when she entered. Their eyes met. Nadia did not look away. She held his gaze for 3 full seconds, long enough for him to understand that the woman who had driven away from their house in October with a single bag and red eyes was not the woman standing in this room. Then she sat down and turned her attention to Carla's folders and did not look at him again. Wendell's attorney opened with a motion to dismiss the freeze order on procedural grounds, arguing that Carla's forensic audit had been conducted without proper authorization and that the evidence obtained was therefore inadmissible. Judge Okafor listened to the argument with the particular stillness of a person who has already identified its weaknesses and is waiting politely for it to finish. When he was done, she said, "The forensic audit was commissioned by a party to the marital estate, reviewing financial disclosures filed in that same estate. The authorization is sound. Motion denied. Ms. Webb, you may proceed." Wendell's attorney sat down. Carla stood up. What followed was 40 minutes of Carla Webb doing what Carla Webb did, laying out the architecture of Wendell's scheme with the calm, methodical precision of someone who had built the case brick by brick and knew exactly where every piece sat. The 3 Delaware shell companies, the Florida entity, the timeline of formations all predating the collapse, all predating the regulatory review that Wendell had cited as the cause of his financial ruin, the $2.3 million in transferred assets, the Archer Colbert Group registration, dated the day after Nadia received her divorce papers. She presented the flight records, Atlanta to Grand Cayman, first class, 4 months into the period when Wendell was claiming near-total financial devastation. She presented the forensic signature analysis, 17 documented inconsistencies between the Archer Colbert founding document and Wendell's verified signature samples. Someone had signed his name. The analysis was unambiguous about that. And then Carla placed the reconstructed letter on the evidence table. Judge Okafor read it without expression. When she finished, she set it down and made a note. Her pen moved for a long time. Wendell's attorney objected to the letter on chain of custody grounds. Judge Okafor overruled him without looking up from her notepad. Then Earl Pickett walked to the witness stand. He moved slowly, not from frailty, but from the unhurried dignity of a man who had decided exactly how he was going to carry himself in this room and was carrying himself that way. He wore the same clean button-down shirt he always wore. His reading glasses were in his breast pocket. His hands, when he placed them on the railing of the witness stand, were completely steady. Carla walked him through it carefully. His 22 years in the building, his role in maintenance, the jammed shredder, the letter caught in the feed rollers, the audio calibration issue, the archived recordings and his access credentials. He answered every question in complete measured sentences. He did not elaborate beyond what was asked. He did not perform emotion. He simply told the truth plainly, clearly, in the voice of a man who had been waiting a long time to say it in the right room. When Carla asked him why he had come forward, Earl was quiet for a moment. He looked at the judge, then at Nadia, then back at the judge. "I cleaned that man's office for 22 years, he said. I watched him treat people like they were part of the furniture, like we were walls, like we couldn't hear or see or remember." He paused. "We could hear, we could see, and I remember." Nobody spoke. The courtroom was absolutely silent, the deep, specific silence of a room full of people who have just heard something true, said plainly, and who need a moment before they can move again. Judge Okafor looked down at her notepad. Wendell looked at the table in front of him. 4 seconds. 5. 6. The silence said everything. Then Carla introduced the USB drive recordings, 2 excerpts transcribed and authenticated. The court listened to Wendell's voice, his actual voice, unhurried and comfortable, in the privacy of a conference room he believed was empty, laying out the collapse timeline with Simone, the asset transfer schedule, the divorce strategy. The language was specific and damning and left no interpretive room whatsoever. And then the second recording. 8 months ago. 2 weeks after Nadia left. Simone's voice. She's really gone. I didn't think she'd actually go. Wendell's voice. I told you. She's too honest to stay once she thinks you're broken. 16 years and I never had to ask twice. A pause. Then laughter. Easy, unhurried, genuinely amused laughter. The laugh of a man who has just watched a plan execute perfectly. Nadia will cry for a month and move on, Wendell said, still laughing. She's soft. The recording ended. The courtroom was not silent this time. People shifted in their seats. Someone behind Nadia exhaled sharply. Rochelle, sitting 2 feet to her left, went completely still. The particular stillness of a woman who is using every ounce of her self-control to stay in her seat. Nadia sat with her hands flat on the table and her eyes forward. She had already heard the recording. She had listened to it alone in Rochelle's guest room 3 nights ago with the door closed and the lights off. She had given herself that one night to feel every dimension of it. The laugh, the words, she's soft. The casual certainty of a man who had never once considered that she might find out. She had used up all her tears on that recording already. She had none left for this room. Simone Archer had arrived at the courthouse separately with her own attorney, a woman named Graves, who had clearly spent the last 48 hours preparing for exactly this scenario. When Judge Okafor called a brief recess and both legal teams stepped into the hallway, Graves approached Carla with a single sheet of paper. A full written statement. Signed by Simone. Dated that morning. Nadia read it standing in the courthouse hallway under fluorescent light, while Rochelle stood beside her and Carla read over her shoulder. Simone confirmed everything. The plan, the timeline, the shell companies, the deliberate manufacturing of the financial collapse. She confirmed that Wendell had recruited her 18 months before the collapse. She confirmed that the Archer Colbert group had been his idea and his design. She confirmed the date he had first told her about the divorce strategy and the exact words he had used. And at the bottom of the statement, in a paragraph that Nadia read twice, Simone had written, on the recorded conversation from 8 months ago when Wendell stated that Nadia would cry for a month and move on, I want the record to reflect that I said nothing in response to that statement. I did not laugh. I did not agree. I am not offering this as mitigation. I am offering it as fact. Nadia folded the statement and handed it back to Carla. She walked back into the courtroom. She sat down. And when Judge Okafor reconvened the session and looked across the room at Wendell Colbert's table and said, "Counsel, I'd like to hear your client's response to the statement just entered into evidence." Wendell's attorney leaned over and whispered something in Wendell's ear. Wendell looked across the courtroom at Nadia for the first time since she'd walked in that morning. She met his eyes. She did not flinch. She did not look away. She did not give him the satisfaction of any expression at all. He looked away first. His attorney stood up and said 4 words that Carla would later describe as the best sound she had heard in 20 years of forensic accounting. "Your Honor, we yield." But as Judge Okafor reached for her gavel to schedule the full ruling, Nadia's phone buzzed against the table. A message from an unknown number. She glanced down. "There's one more account. He opened it in your name. Check your credit report. Tonight. Don't wait." Nadia stared at the screen. Her name. He had used her name. She looked up slowly and found Carla already watching her, because Carla had seen her face change, and she turned the phone screen toward her without a word. Carla read it. Her jaw tightened. She reached for her own phone. The credit report came back in 40 minutes. Carla pulled it through a secured legal access portal on her phone, standing in the courthouse hallway during the lunch recess. Nadia beside her, Rochelle 2 steps away, with her arms folded and her eyes on the door like she was standing guard. The account was real. A revolving credit line opened 14 months ago, the same month as the Delaware Shell Companies, the same month as the beginning of everything in Nadia Colbert's name, using her social security number, her date of birth, her former home address. The credit limit was $50,000. The current balance was $47,340. 14 months of charges, office supplies, software subscriptions, wire transfer fees. The administrative overhead of building Archer Colbert Group, paid for on paper by a woman who had been selling her mother's jewelry to keep the lights on while it was happening. Nadia read the account summary twice. Her face did not change. Identity fraud, Carla said quietly. Opening a credit account in someone's name without their knowledge or consent. That's federal. How federal? Rochelle asked. The kind that doesn't stay in family court, Carla said. She was already dialing. The afternoon session reconvened at 1:15 p.m. Carla entered the credit report into evidence. She entered the account opening documents, which bore Nadia's forged signature alongside Wendell's authenticated one, and she entered a comparative analysis prepared by the same document examiner who had reviewed the Archer Colbert founding papers. The forged signatures on both documents shared 11 identical characteristics. Same hand, same pen pressure, same deliberate imitation of Nadia's signature that she used on their joint tax returns documents Wendell had filed on their behalf for 16 years and therefore had 16 years of practice studying. Wendell's attorney objected 3 times during Carla's presentation. Judge Okafor overruled all 3 without significant pause. When Carla finished, Judge Okafor set down her pen and looked at Wendell's table with the expression of a woman who had seen many things in 22 years on the bench and was not surprised by any of them, but who was nonetheless done. Counsel, she said, your client is now facing allegations that extend considerably beyond the scope of this family court proceeding. I am referring this matter to the U.S. Attorney's Office for review of potential federal charges including wire fraud, fraudulent transfer in anticipation of divorce judgment, and identity theft. She looked over her glasses. The asset freeze on all Archer Colbert Group accounts and subsidiary entities is hereby made permanent pending federal review. The divorce proceeding will continue with full financial disclosure ordered under penalty of contempt. She looked at Wendell directly. Mr. Colbert, I want to be very clear with you. This court has seen the letter. This court has heard the recordings. This court has reviewed the forensic analysis. What has been presented here today is not a misunderstanding or a dispute about accounting methods. A pause, deliberate and complete. This was a plan, executed against your wife, documented in your own handwriting. I want you to understand that this court sees it for exactly what it is. Wendell sat very still. He said nothing. His attorney said nothing. The gavel came down. They arrested him in the courthouse hallway. 2 federal agents, a man and a woman, both in dark suits, both unhurried in the way of people who are very certain of what they are doing, were waiting when the courtroom doors opened. They approached Wendell's attorney, first exchanged a brief word, and then moved to Wendell. He did not shout. He did not argue. He did not perform any of the emotions he had spent 16 years performing so convincingly in private. He went quiet. That was the thing Nadia would remember most. Not the handcuffs, not his attorney's rapid, murmured instructions, not the small crowd of courthouse staff and attorneys who had stopped moving to watch. She would remember the quiet, the way all the performance finally completely ran out of him the moment there was no longer any audience worth performing for. He was walked down the hallway toward the elevator. He did not look back. Rochelle stood beside Nadia and watched until he was gone. Then she exhaled, long, slow, the breath of someone releasing something they had been holding for a very long time. 11 months, Rochelle said quietly. 11 months I watched you carry that man's lie. Nadia didn't answer. She was still watching the empty hallway. Simone Archer accepted a plea agreement 4 days later. She cooperated fully, providing the federal investigators with account access communication records and a detailed timeline of the scheme's development that filled 63 pages. In exchange, her sentence was reduced. She would serve 18 months pay restitution and surrender all rights and claims to Archer Colbert Group. The forged ownership stake was voided. Everything Simone had built inside that company, every percentage point she had maneuvered and manipulated to claim, was erased. She walked away with less than she had started with, and a federal record that would follow her considerably longer than 18 months. Nadia felt nothing toward her. Not satisfaction. Not anger. Not the complicated, almost sympathy she had briefly touched in the days after Simone's text. Just nothing. The way you feel nothing toward weather that has already passed. The divorce was finalized 3 weeks after the federal arrest. With the full financial disclosure now court-ordered and the shell company assets frozen and accessible, Carla rebuilt the true picture of the marital estate. $2.3 million in hidden assets. The Atlanta house. Investment accounts that had been quietly bled but not entirely emptied. Legal costs incurred by Nadia during the proceedings. The settlement was substantial. It was, the judge noted in her ruling, the number that reflected what Nadia Colbert had actually been entitled to from the beginning, before the shell companies, before the manufactured collapse, before the hotel receipt and the burner phone and the letter in the shredder. Before all of it. Nadia sat in Carla's office the afternoon the settlement was signed and looked at the final number on the document for a long time. She thought about the $11,000 Wendell had told her they had left. She thought about the gold earrings, the skipped physical, the 4 months she had held everything together with both hands, while he was already 3 steps into the exit. She signed her name, her actual name, her real signature, the one nobody had forged. Outside the courthouse 3 weeks earlier, a reporter from a local news station had caught Nadia on the steps. A young woman, recorder in hand, who had been covering the federal referral story and recognized Nadia from the court documents. "Ms. Colbert, can you tell us how you're feeling right now?" Nadia stopped walking. She considered the question honestly, not performing an answer. Not shaping it for the camera, just actually considering it the way she considered everything now, carefully and without hurry. "I feel like myself again," she said finally. "For the first time in almost 2 years, I feel like myself." The reporter nodded, recorder steady. "And what would you say to other women in situations like yours?" Nadia was quiet for a moment. "I'd say trust what you feel in your body before you trust what someone tells you with their mouth." She paused. "And I'd say that being honest, being trusting, being the kind of person who believes in people, that is not a weakness. That is not what made this happen." Her voice was steady and clear. "Someone chose to use it. That's on them. Not you. Never you." She walked down the steps. Rochelle was waiting at the bottom, keys in hand, eyes wet in the way they had been wet on and off for 3 weeks. The tears of a woman watching her sister come back to herself after a very long time away. Earl Pickett was standing a few feet to the right, slightly apart from everything, watching quietly. He had not expected to be here. Nadia had called him that morning and asked him to come, and he had said he didn't need to be there. And she had said she knew he didn't need to be, but she needed him to be, and so he came. When Nadia reached the bottom of the steps, she walked directly to Earl and hugged him. Not a polite hug. A real one, the kind that says you changed the course of my life. And I don't have adequate words for that, so I am giving you this instead. Earl stood very still for a moment, surprised. Then his arms came up, and he held on with the quiet strength of a man who had spent a lifetime being invisible in rooms full of powerful people and had never once been thanked for what he saw. "Thank you, Mr. Earl," Nadia whispered into his shoulder. "Thank you." Earl cleared his throat. He stepped back and looked at her with his steady, unhurried eyes. "You did the hard part," he said. "I just remembered what I saw." That evening, Nadia sat in Rochelle's kitchen while her sister cooked real cooking, the Sunday, the kind that fills a house with smell and warmth and the particular comfort of someone feeding you because they love you. They didn't talk much. They didn't need to. The quiet between them was the good kind, the kind that has been earned. Nadia's phone was on the table face up. It buzzed once. She picked it up. An envelope notification from the courier service that had handled the divorce paperwork, a final delivery confirmation. She dismissed it without reading it. Then beneath it, a second notification. Her email. New message, no subject line, sender address she didn't recognize. She opened it. Inside was a single image. A photograph scanned slightly overexposed, the edges soft with age. Nadia and Wendell on their wedding day, 16 years ago. Standing outside the hall on Cascade Road, her mother Gloria just visible at the edge of the frame, the August light falling golden across everything. They were laughing, both of them. The kind of laughing that happens when something has just surprised you with how good it is. At the bottom of the image, typed in a plain font, 3 lines. "I did love you. Once. I'm sorry it wasn't enough to make me be better. Don't write back." Nadia looked at the photograph for a long time. She looked at her own face, 28 years old, laughing in August light, leaning into a man she had just promised her life to. She looked at his face. She thought about the coffee on the counter. 16 years of it. Every morning. She thought about the letter in the shredder. She thought about the laugh on the recording. She closed the email. She set the phone down. She picked up her fork, and she ate her sister's cooking, and she let the warmth of the kitchen hold her. And for the first time in almost 2 years, she did not feel the need to figure out which version of Wendell Colbert had been real. It didn't matter anymore. She was real. That was enough. 6 months later, the house on Campbellton Road had different curtains. Nadia had chosen them herself, a warm cream color that let the morning light in without filtering it, so that when the sun came through the front windows, it fell across the floors in long, clean rectangles that moved slowly through the day. She had noticed in the months since she moved back in how much she paid attention to light now, how much she noticed the quality of ordinary things. She had repainted the living room on a Saturday in early spring. Rochelle drove up from Macon with old clothes and a playlist, and they painted for 7 hours straight, stopping only for lunch sandwiches eaten sitting on the covered floors, and by evening, the room was a deep, quiet sage green that made the whole house feel like it had finally exhaled. "This is the color this room always wanted to be," Rochelle said, roller in hand, looking around. Nadia looked around too. "Yeah," she said. "It is." The Youth Counseling Center opened on the first Saturday of June. It was not large, a converted storefront on a commercial block in southwest Atlanta. 3 counseling rooms, a resource library, a common area with secondhand furniture that Nadia had refinished herself over 4 weekends, and a small office in the back where she kept her notebook. The one from the nightstand. The one full of sketches and program ideas she had been building since before the dream had a name. She named the center herself, not after anyone famous, not after a concept or a slogan. She named the main community room the room where you don't have to pretend, painted in clean letters above the door in the same sage green as her living room walls. On the day it opened, 43 people came. Teenagers, mostly a few parents, 2 school administrators from the district who had heard about it through Nadia's old professional network. Someone brought a cake. Someone else brought a playlist. By noon, the common area was full of noise and light, and the specific kind of energy that only exists when something that should have existed a long time ago finally does. Nadia stood in the doorway of her office and watched it, and felt something settle in her chest that had been unsettled for a very long time. Her mother Gloria's name was on a small plaque beside the resource library door. In memory of Nadia Colbert, who taught her daughters that love is not passive. Earl Pickett started coming on Tuesdays. He showed up the second week with a toolbox and fixed a door hinge that had been sticking since move-in. The week after that, he fixed the fluorescent light in the back hallway that flickered. The week after that, he came without a specific task and just stayed. Reorganized the supply closet. Helped a teenager who was waiting for an appointment carry a box in from a car. Nadia started leaving an envelope on her desk every Tuesday with his name on it. A consulting fee, she told him. Earl left it on the desk every Tuesday unopened. Every Tuesday evening before he left, Nadia put it in a card anyway. By December, she had given him 12 cards. He kept all of them in a shoebox at home, which she found out later from his daughter, who told her with an expression of fond exasperation that her father had never kept cards from anyone in his life before. Wendell pled guilty on 2 counts in federal court in September: wire fraud and identity theft. He was sentenced to 4 years and ordered to pay full restitution. His attorney cited his previously clean record and his cooperation with the asset recovery process as mitigating factors. The judge acknowledged them and sentenced him anyway. Nadia did not attend the sentencing. She had a class to teach that morning, a group of 11 teenagers working through a 6-week communication and self-advocacy program she had designed herself. She taught the full session, stayed 20 minutes after to talk with 2 students who had questions, and drove home in the early afternoon with the windows down. She found out about the sentence from Carla, who texted her a single line at 2:30 p.m. 4 years. It's done. Nadia read it at a red light. Thank you, she typed back. She put the phone down and drove the rest of the way home. One evening in late autumn, Nadia was sitting on the front porch with a cup of tea when one of the younger participants from the center, a girl named Destiny 17, sharp and watchful and perpetually skeptical of everything, stopped on the sidewalk on her way past. Miss Nadia, Destiny said, can I ask you something? Always, Nadia said. Destiny shifted her backpack on her shoulder. She looked at the porch, then at Nadia with the particular expression of a teenager who has been thinking about something for a long time and has finally decided to say it out loud. Shut after everything that happened to you, do you still believe in people? Nadia was quiet for a moment. She looked out at the street. The streetlights were just beginning to come on one by one the way they always did at this hour, not all at once, but gradually, each one finding its moment. I believe in the right ones, she said finally. And I got better at telling the difference. Destiny considered this. Then she nodded slowly, the nod of someone who has just received something they didn't know they needed. She kept walking. Nadia held her tea with both hands and watched the streetlights finish coming on and thought about a parking lot at 10:47 p.m., a folder on her lap, a wedding ring on the dashboard. She had been so broken in that moment. She didn't know she was also beginning. Some people are so afraid of being caught that they destroy every real thing they ever had. And some people are so afraid of the truth that they almost let the lie win. But truth is patient. It waits. It finds its witnesses in shredded letters, in archived recordings, in the memory of a quiet man who cleaned an office for 22 years and never stopped paying attention. And when truth finally speaks, it does not whisper. It fills every room. It changes every outcome. It finds you in parking lots at 10:47 p.m. and breaks you open so something better can grow. If this story moved you, if you have ever loved someone who used that love against you, or if you have ever had to rebuild yourself from the ground up, leave a comment below and tell me where you are watching from. I read every single one. And if someone in your life needs to hear this story, today share it with them. That's how these stories find the people who need them most. Subscribe if you haven't already. There are more stories coming, and every single one is for you.